Hello, and thanks for joining our next session, where we're going to be talking about squiggly careers. That's the concept of a career that's perhaps more self-driven and flexible than those might have been in the past. And I'm delighted to speak to Lubnah Alam, Director of Financial Operations at EG Group, to hear about her own squiggly journey. Thanks for joining us, Lubnah. Perhaps if we sort of wind the clock back a little bit to the beginning, and if we talk about what you were like maybe as a child, what were the kind of things that really captivated you, if you can think back to those times?
I think I'm the youngest of four, and I grew up in a kind of traditional Muslim kind of household in a small town. So I don't think I ever fit. You know, where you've got siblings or you've got cousins and you're of the same age group. I don't think I ever fit anywhere. So I think I was in between age groups. So I never fit into the high end of the age group or the lower end. But I think growing up for me was more my mum. I was a single parent. Mum was a single parent, and I'm the youngest of four. Growing up in a small town, very much mum was very resilient, very strong, very determined, and had to be. But we're being brought up in an environment which was culturally restricting for girls. And so for me, I was always like, well, hang on a minute. You're so good at this and you're out there doing all of this, yet how you're kind of operating in the culture in which I'm growing up is, well, girls don't do that, boys do that, and boys can do that, but girls can't. So it was really quite weird. So I always felt out of place and thought, no, why can I not do it? I want to do it, kind of thing. So that's kind of where I think my journey really started off, and the influence of me going through my career and the journey that I've been on.
And do you think that you've brought some of those traits some of the things that you've talked about just then, do you think you've sort of brought those to bear with you on your career going through?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes I need to taper them in, don't get me wrong. But am I strong-willed? Yeah. Do I say it like it is? Am I direct and just love problem solving? Absolutely. I do. But I think that whole piece around women and promoting women in leadership, coaching and mentoring women, and just giving them a space. But also, I think for me, it's almost like giving the underdog a bit of an opportunity. So somebody who really wants, just give me that first opportunity, because I remember when I was out in the market, it was like you're overqualified for that, but you don't have enough experience. So it was like the chicken and egg. So for me now, throughout my journey and the positions that I've been in, I've almost, wherever somebody's come to me and said, just give me a chance, just take a punt on me, I've always done it. Whether it's worked or not. But yeah, definitely those kind of characteristics that I was brought up with have stayed with me.
And I think it's it's evidence to see in the career that you've had, but having that level of determination, I think makes a big difference. And I think it's great to hear that you have develop that within your team and people that you've worked with as well, about making sure that people have got that foot in the door, because sometimes that can be the turning point in someone's life, can't it? You've got the ability to make a big difference to somebody's life, but just giving them a chance.
Yeah, and I don't think I would be where I am if somebody didn't give me the opportunity to do it. I mean, you work hard and you want to prove them right, that they made the right choice, but I wouldn't be where I am without somebody giving me those opportunities along the way.
And what do you think's been the biggest motivation that you've had in your success?
I think having a daughter, and I only have one daughter, I think it's been really important for me. And I can see the influence I have on her, and the way I bring her up is the restrictions I had, I completely give her free rein and say, go and explore. If you want to go traveling, go traveling. Not that you're not a boy or you're a girl, makes no difference, but give her that strength, that independence, and definitely wanting to be a role model for her and say, you know how they say it is, if you can see it, you can be it. So really wanting her to fly and see her succeed. But I think, every day is an opportunity. So for me, it's just take it. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody's just going to say no. One door closes and a window opens. You just keep going.
Yeah, and absolutely, you know, you need to see those opportunities and maybe take them as well, because it's so easy, isn't it, to
Yeah.
see opportunities come your way, or maybe not even recognize them as opportunities, but just, you know, you can just sort of think, oh well, that's not really for me. I don't see anybody else who's like me in that role, therefore I'll just let it go.
Yeah.
It's very easy, I think, you know, to let those kind of things happen unless you almost take a risk, isn't it, I suppose?
You've got to be brave, haven't you? And a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up and probably internalize it and think, you know, why can't I do it? Why am I not taking that step? Just do it. What's the worst that can happen? So there's a little bit practice what you preach and see what happens, but I suffer from it as well. You sit there and think, you can do it. What was the big deal? Why are you not doing it? But
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, you've, like we just talked about, you know, you've got to put that first foot forward, haven't you, and then see what happens as a result
yeah,
of that. I mean, I think that, you know, listening to you, so I know my daughters, you know, look at me and think, okay, this is what can happen. You know, this is what you can do. Whereas I guess, like me as well, my experiences with
yeah,
watching my mother, you know, was somewhat different.
yeah.
Um, so at the start of your career, were your sights firmly set on finance from an early age?
Nope, not at all. I remember I had this really weird vision of what I wanted to do, and you'll be really shocked by this, Ellen, is that I actually did business studies when I was at college. I wanted to go into marketing. But I also had this thing in my mind is I don't want to work after I'm married. Why at the ripe old age of 18 I'd want to think that? But I was like, nah, I don't want to work after I'm married. I want to stay at home, have a family, look after the house. And it was actually my business studies teacher who was like, why don't you try doing accounting A level? I'm like, really? Never even thought about that as a career or finance, didn't know anything about it, but did it, absolutely loved it. And then went on to university and did a finance and accounting degree. And I have a friend that I made at university I'm still friends with, who was a very determined young lady about, I want a career in finance, I want to be an accountant. And I just sat on her coattails and went along for the ride. And that's how I fell into finance and accounting. It was never something I sat when I was young thinking, what's my dream job? I want to be an accountant or I want to manage shared services. Never. But I fell into it. And again, it was an opportunity that I just took and it worked.
And I suppose, you know, having somebody as well alongside you that's got that kind of
Yeah.
idea, and just think, do you know what? I'll give that a go. And once you find something that you like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes all the difference, doesn't it?
There's
If
so
you
many different people that influence you along the way in your journey, don't they? Some right, some wrong, and you've just got to take that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what do you think's the we've talked about what motivated you as a child and some of your first steps. But what do you think, looking back along the whole of that journey, has been your biggest achievement so far, or something that you've been most proud of, perhaps?
I think there's probably a few things, but I think the game changer of where I stepped away from being a traditional, let's say, financial controller, kind of that route, to landing into doing the shared services piece around systems and change in people was probably when I worked at Talk and took that was my first introduction to shared services when they decided to set up a finance shared service centre in the north, and then to implement a system, but in 20 weeks. That was it. It was just an incredible journey that, again, I took that step and said, let me do it. I really want to have a go. But it was a great support network. It was a great team. And I always refer back to that particular part of my career where that was the stepping stone for me. So I think being involved in setting up the shared service center and then leading the Microsoft Dynamics implementation in 20 weeks was just an absolute thrill. And then there was no turning back for me from there, from a shared service perspective. So I think that is pivotal. But I think the other thing that I'm really quite proud of at the moment is that I like talking about my journey. I do get surprised why people are interested, but I'm doing a little bit more of going out there and sharing journeys and you know, how is it, you know, is there a better way of doing things, and just collaborating with people and learning off different people's experiences.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, when because we're talking about sort of squiggly careers in our conversation today, I think to some extent, people look at others when they've achieved a great deal in their career, and think, it probably went like this, bump, bump, bump. We have a kind of simplistic idea, maybe because it's very, it's quite often when we look at something, we go for the most easy option. Think, that it must have been achieved like this, but to actually sort of look underneath and think, how did it happen? I think that then helps others who want to achieve something for themselves along the same way. There's not just one route in. There are many different ways that you can achieve something. We talked a little bit just then about technology. Obviously, that's changed quite a lot along the path of your career. And I suppose nowadays, especially around AI, what do you think the future of finance will look like? Do you think there's going to be a dependence on AI, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think there's a definite place for AI or RPA in any organization, and not just in finance. I think across the board. I think it really depends on the maturity of the organization and the maturity and the thinking of the leaders. So I see some people using it as a buzzword and thinking, we need to put it in and need to be seen to be doing something with it, but actually not realizing the benefits of what it can actually do, i.e. simplifying it. I've definitely used I look at shared services. I've got thousands of processes and different variations of them. Why wouldn't I want to cut out the noise? Because my quest is about saying to my people, do value add. There's no point in you sitting there and just turning the handle on something if you're not going to look at it. And what's the best way for me to be able to free up your time to look at that is to automate the turning of the handle, basically. So I think, and I've now put it in 3 different places that I've just done it now at EG, and the sell. A lot of people say to me, "Well, do your teams not feel like you're gonna get rid of them and make them redundant?" I'm like, no, because I'm selling the benefits of it, and they can see it because they're actually doing more value add work. So I do think there's a place for it. I think, like I said, different organizations, different maturity levels. But for me, it's that leadership piece as well. So I can sell it, I can drive it, but I have to sell it to my boss to say, can we do it? So is it really coming top down? Do the leadership really have a strategy and a journey? In the organizations I've worked for, it's been a bit of a sell. I've had to put a business case together rather than somebody at the top saying, you know what, that's where we need to be. So, yeah, I do think there's a place for it, definitely.
And I think that's interesting to hear, I think. And I guess to some extent it does depend on the different organizations and how mature, not necessarily how mature they are as an organization, as in how long they've been in existence, but actually what their technology maturity is. And sometimes those two things are quite different in terms of, a well-established organization sometimes can be the worst, particularly if they're a cash-rich organization. So I like that, cutting out the noise. Effectively, that's what it does, isn't it? You're raising
100%.
the levels of efficiency and that kind of stuff that really gets in the way of doing business well. So you've been in lots of different roles in finance over the years in a number of different industries. Could you just tell us a little bit about that journey and what sort of motivated you to go from one industry perhaps to another?
Yeah, sure. So I think I've worked in about 7 different sectors, Ellen, to be honest with you. I've started off in public sector. I worked for Greater Manchester Police. I worked for manufacturing. I worked for a US company. So the whole SOX piece came with that. I worked for telecoms. I've done housing. I've done education. I'm in retail. So I think the one thing that I've learned along the way is, a P&L and a balance sheet is a P&L and a balance sheet. It doesn't matter which sector you work in, and there'll be a few nuances from a reporting perspective. But the bit that I've learned and I've really enjoyed moving from sector is getting that experience of dealing with people whether it's my peers, whether it's my stakeholders, whether it's my teams. And because a lot of what I want to do and I do is around change and influencing people and bringing people on that journey. So whether I work in a construction male dominated, then that builds resilience for me on how I deal with those stakeholders, to going to Karachi and working in a different environment and dealing with different people in different sectors. So for me, people are my asset. I stand by that. I can buy the tiniest toy in a system, but if I don't have the right people and the right skill set, or be able to, I don't know, coach them, improve their skill set, put square pegs in square holes as opposed to round holes. I've learned a lot through my journey from the people that I've worked with and have been exposed to.
I love that. People are my asset. I mean, I think, quite often when I talk to organizations, particularly around transformation, their first thought is around technology. And of course, you're not going to be able to transform your processes without technology. But it's the people that really make it happen. So, and having those different sectors, I suppose, gives you that eyes wide open around how different people can be. And then, of course, as you just mentioned, you pivoted and sort of took on an HR role in Karachi, Pakistan. What was that like?
Do you know what? That was a point in my life where I am very risk averse. So I go into things with my eyes open. And that opportunity came. I'm a real believer in things happen for a reason, and you've got to be in the right place at the right time. And that opportunity came about, and I still sit there think, hang on a minute. I had to say to the recruiter, "Did you do know I'm finance, right?" Yeah, we know. But I'm finance, I'm not HR. But they were like, that's okay. We've got the people with the expertise here, but you've got transferable skills. We need somebody who's set up a shared service center. It doesn't matter whether it's not finance, it was HR. We need somebody who can recruit the right people to do the job. We need somebody who can do stakeholder management. So Karachi, why Karachi? I speak Urdu fluently. My husband's from Karachi. I know the city. So it was kind of a bit of not a risk per se, but a calculated risk because I knew where I was going. And it was a time of my life where my daughter was doing a GCSE. She was in her final year. My husband said, you know what, go and do something for yourself. You're going to really enjoy it. You know it. And if it doesn't work, what's the worst that can happen? You can come back. And so I did, and I really enjoyed it. And was I worried and nervous? Absolutely, because I was going off on my own. Family didn't come with me, but you know what? It made me realize again that I can do it. I can do it. So, and I did enjoy it. And actually, if I ever got the opportunity again to work abroad, I probably would feel less nervous about doing that now.
I suppose it's a question of opening those horizons or broadening your horizons, isn't it? And I think, quite often at PPN, we talk about people who, or departments, organizations that work in silos and trying to help them to overcome that. And we're often talking about, just raise your head above the parapet and just see what else is going on. Sometimes that's about coming to conferences like those we put on at PPN, or attending webinars or our focus week. Because sometimes people have I don't know if capacity is the right word, but they tend to sometimes even silo themselves. I couldn't do that. I couldn't possibly do that. I'm in finance. How could I do HR? But it's a question of thinking differently, isn't it? I think sometimes. So do you think that skills learned in finance are maybe more transferable than people sometimes think they are?
I think so. I mean, like I said, I was astonished when I got offered the HR role, but I think the world of finance has definitely changed for me. So long gone are the days where your traditional accountant just sat in a room and never spoke to anybody and just churned out the numbers and that was it. We play a much bigger role now. For me, the main part of my role is the end-to-end piece. So it's not just about thinking about what's going on in my remit. It's about bringing everybody to the table to say, let's look at this end-to-end and what's for the greater good, as opposed to just that little bit. And so I build relationships with the IT team or with procurement or with ops, because they need me and I need them when I'm influencing change. And so I think the people skills element and that's become quite key. So I think they are definitely transferable. I think for finance, we've got an added bonus now because we understand the numbers and we can use data rather than emotion to present an argument. We've just evolved in the way we communicate and deal with people out in the business, I think.
Yeah, it's become a slightly different profession, hasn't it? Certainly the concept of it has. And I think that if you're, as a person, able to see that and build relationships, it's going to take your career and I guess maybe different places than you imagined it might have done. I know that we sometimes talk about finance as being right at the center of an organization and therefore has the vision into other departments like you just talked about. So, I mean, what would you say to somebody maybe who's listening to us today, who's just starting out on their career, or maybe they're stuck in a rut and don't know where to go next? What would your advice be to them?
I think my advice to them would be go and seek out the opportunities because, and I say this to my entire team, is development is a personal thing. You're only going to get out of it what you put in. And if you're not happy and you want something different, then go and have a conversation with somebody that can help you. You know, you'll have one-to-ones with either your team leader, your manager, or whoever. Be open about where you want to go, because quite often somebody will say, well, I'm not progressing. Well, okay, well, what do you want? And they've never thought about it. They just want progression, but don't know what that progression actually means. And a lot of the conversations I have is progression doesn't necessarily mean upwards. It can mean sideways as well. Go and get some different experiences, work with different people. So I think for me, it'd be take the blinkers off and explore your opportunities, but be very clear on what that actually means for you as well. So it becomes a win-win situation as well. You're not forced into going and doing something and not be happy about it because actually you're going to get paid a little bit more, but you're not going to be happy with the work. There's got to be a balance in that. And sometimes the experience will be a higher priority than actually being paid, or sometimes the pay will be a higher priority. But I think if you don't ask, you don't get. So, and I say that, and I advise that to my daughter who's about to go off to university, like I've said, is explore your opportunities. You don't know what you want, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
No, absolutely. Do you know, I think that a lot of what you've been talking about just then comes down to being curious as well, doesn't it? You know, and I suppose being curious about yourself and your own capacity and capabilities, because we talk about in finance, don't we, about making sure that you've got an eye on the outcomes that you want to achieve. Perhaps we need to sort of bring that back to ourselves, hearing you speak just then, as maybe we need to look at personal outcomes as well, and what we want. Okay, so we've talked about your journey so far, and your career in finance, and what motivated you, and the pivot that you made to HR, and the reasons for that. What's next for you?
Crikey, I was thinking about this question. I think for me, if there's one thing I'm yet to tick off is to either be part of or set up a GBS. So I've done the finance bit and done the shared service bit and kind of know that market and how that kind of works, and pivoted in doing HR. So actually much of a muchness, really, again, transferable skills. But yeah, I think that's something that it's like a bit of an itch that at some point I'm thinking I really, really want to be able to do that. And I think the other thing is, I don't know, I really enjoyed working abroad. So I think if I got the opportunity again, to do that, that's probably something that I would probably explore. But in the meantime, EG Group's keeping me very, very, very busy.
Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you, Lubnah, and hear all about your journey. And I'm sure, hearing of what you've all done, what you've done so far, you're going to be scratching that itch at some point, I'm sure. It's been fantastic, as I say, to talk to you, and for sharing your journey. And I'm sure if anyone has got any questions that you want to ask, I guess, Lubnah, you'll be happy to speak to them and help them out as well. But as I say, great to speak to you. Take care, and thanks for everyone for listening.
Right. Thank you very much. See you soon.
All right. Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.